Someone fell deeply in love with you because of these three things. The second will shock you. Carl Jung. There is something you need to hear today, and part of you already knows it. Someone did not simply feel attracted to you. They did not only admire you from a distance or enjoy your presence for a brief moment. Someone fell in love with you in a way that surprised even them. What makes this so powerful is that it did not happen because of something obvious. It happened because something about you reached them far more deeply than appearances ever could. It was not only your appearance, it was not because you tried to impress them, it was not because you chased them, begged for their attention, or forced a connection. It happened because of three very specific qualities within you. Three qualities that reached parts of them they had protected for years. And the second one is something most people would never expect. When you understand this, many confusing moments between you and this person may suddenly begin to make sense. Perhaps you have wondered why they sometimes looked at you differently, why their energy seemed to change whenever you were around. There were moments when they felt incredibly close, almost completely present. Then, without warning, they became emotionally distant or difficult to understand. That contradiction hurt because it seemed to make no logical sense. How could someone feel so connected one moment and so unavailable the next? This is where many people misunderstand love. Love does not always create immediate closeness. Sometimes real love does the opposite. It exposes hidden wounds and awakens emotions a person has spent years trying to avoid. When someone truly falls in love, especially someone who has learned to protect their emotions, they do not experience only desire. They experience vulnerability. They feel exposed. They face the frightening possibility of being completely seen. That emotional exposure can feel more terrifying than the idea of losing the relationship itself. Carl Jung believed that the people who affect us most are often the ones who awaken the unconscious parts of ourselves, not because they intend to, but because their presence naturally slips past our emotional defenses. Suddenly, the mask begins to fall away. Suddenly, the emotional world they carefully controlled starts to shake. Everything they believed they had mastered begins to feel uncertain. That brings us to the first reason they fell in love with you. You made them feel emotionally safe without trying to control them. At first, that sounds simple, but in reality, it is incredibly rare. Many people enter relationships carrying hidden expectations. They seek reassurance, certainty, or emotional guarantees without even realizing it. Your energy felt different. Even when you wanted closeness, something about your presence never felt controlling. You were emotionally available without becoming overwhelming. You were warm without demanding constant reassurance. You gave them space without disappearing emotionally, and that quietly changed how they experienced you. Many emotionally guarded people expect love to feel like pressure. They expect closeness to become obligation. They expect intimacy to eventually become control. Somewhere in their past, they learned that opening their heart came with consequences. Because of that, they became careful, cautious, and deeply protective of themselves. Perhaps love became conditional. Perhaps affection was mixed with criticism. Perhaps emotional honesty was answered with rejection, shame, or abandonment. Over time, they built emotional walls that felt impossible to lower. They learned to hide their feelings instead of expressing them. Self-protection slowly became their normal way of living. Then you entered their life, and something unexpected happened. Your presence quietly challenged everything they believed about emotional connection. You did not force emotional intensity. You did not constantly demand explanations. You did not turn every emotional inconsistency into conflict. Instead, you allowed them to simply exist without pressure. Without saying it directly, your presence communicated something they rarely experienced. It told them, "I see you, and I am not trying to trap you." That kind of emotional safety is extraordinary. It reaches beyond conscious thought and settles into the nervous system. It quietly tells the body that it may finally be safe to relax. Often, the person experiencing this cannot explain what is happening. They simply notice that they feel calmer around you. They think about you when they are alone. Your absence feels heavier than they expected. Your presence brings relief they cannot fully explain, even if they never admit it aloud. That is often how love begins. Not always with fireworks or dramatic confessions. Sometimes love begins with the quiet recognition of safety. Sometimes the heart says yes, long before the mind understands why. That quiet emotional recognition is often far stronger than excitement alone. The safer they felt with you, the more threatening you became to the emotional walls they had spent years building. It sounds contradictory, but it reflects a common pattern in attachment psychology. The deeper the connection feels, the more old survival strategies begin to activate. Fear quietly tells them to protect themselves before they get hurt. Their mind begins searching for reasons to pull away, slow things down, regain control, and protect itself. Because if this relationship becomes deeply important, then losing it would hurt deeply as well. Fear convinces them that distance feels safer than vulnerability, even though their heart quietly wants the opposite. Perhaps you witnessed this yourself. Just when everything seemed to become closer, they grew quieter, more distant, more difficult to understand, almost as if they were struggling with something invisible. In many cases, they were not fighting you at all. What they were fighting was what your presence awakened inside them. You became a mirror reflecting emotions they could no longer ignore. The connection forced them to face feelings they had spent years avoiding, and that inner conflict often looked like confusion from the outside, even though it was really fear beneath the surface. And that brings us to the second reason, the one that surprises almost everyone. The second reason they fell in love with you is because you reflected back the parts of themselves they had rejected. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the hidden emotional self that holds everything we suppress, deny, or try to hide. It contains vulnerability, longing, tenderness, grief, and the softer parts of our nature. Many people spend years pretending these qualities no longer exist. Over time, they build identities designed to protect themselves. They become strong, logical, independent, emotionally controlled, and self-reliant. These qualities are not false, but they often develop as protection against past pain. Then, someone enters their life who quietly reflects the parts they left behind. Without realizing it, you became that reflection. Your emotional honesty challenged their emotional distance. Your kindness softened the walls they had carefully built. Your intuition recognized feelings they had worked hard to hide from everyone else. Without trying, you showed them the version of themselves they had forgotten. That kind of recognition is powerful because it reaches beneath the surface where words cannot. You made them feel emotionally visible, not just noticed on the outside, but truly understood within. That kind of visibility is beautiful, yet it can also feel terrifying. Being deeply seen means losing the ability to hide behind familiar masks. It means someone recognizes the truth you have spent years trying to protect. Perhaps you noticed moments when they reacted strongly to simple things you said. Maybe you sensed sadness behind their confidence or fear behind their calm behavior. You may have understood emotional patterns they never explained. Each time you gently touched one of those hidden truths, something inside them responded because you had seen what they thought nobody else could. For someone who has survived by remaining emotionally invisible, being accurately understood can feel overwhelming. That is often why they pulled away after moments of unusual closeness. The connection did not weaken. It became stronger than their defenses could comfortably handle. The closer they felt to you, the harder it became to ignore what was happening inside. You became a mirror, and mirrors reveal more than beauty. They reveal fear, loneliness, grief, and emotional wounds that have never fully healed. Through you, they may have realized how lonely they truly were. They may have recognized how deeply they longed for tenderness after convincing themselves they no longer needed it. That realization can shake a person completely. The ego wants control. It wants to stay protected, composed, and emotionally independent. Love quietly challenges all of those beliefs. It reminds a person that they are not as unaffected as they pretend to be. It asks them to become emotionally honest, and that can feel frightening. The most surprising part was not simply that they liked you. It was that you reached places inside them they believed no one would ever reach again. That creates enormous inner conflict. One part of them wants to move closer, while another part wants to run. One part feels relief, while another feels panic. This emotional split often creates confusing behavior. It appears as mixed signals, emotional inconsistency, unexpected silence, or moments of warmth followed by distance. These behaviors do not always mean love is absent. Very often, they mean love is colliding with unresolved emotional wounds that have never been fully healed. If their contradictions have left you confused, remember this. Sometimes the person who feels the deepest shows the least, not because they do not care, but because caring feels overwhelming. Expressing those emotions requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is exactly what they have spent years trying to avoid. That brings us to the third reason they fell in love with you. You awakened something they believed had disappeared forever. You awakened hope. Not fantasy or obsession, but genuine emotional hope. A quiet belief that meaningful connection might still be possible despite everything they had experienced. Many people quietly stop believing they will ever be deeply understood. They continue living their lives, smiling, working, and talking to others. Yet somewhere inside, they lower their expectations. They stop believing someone could truly meet them in the places that matter most. Emotional survival slowly replaces emotional openness. Then someone unexpectedly changes everything. A conversation feels different, a presence feels strangely familiar, an energy feels meaningful in ways they cannot explain. Something that had been asleep for years slowly begins waking up. They start imagining possibilities they had taught themselves to stop believing in. They begin wanting things they convinced themselves they no longer needed. They begin longing for connection, tenderness, belonging, and the feeling of emotional home. That awakening is powerful because hope changes everything. Once hope returns, the heart begins opening again, and numbness is no longer possible. That may be why they think about you more often than you realize. You became more than another person in their life. You became a symbol of possibility. You reminded them that love was not completely gone from within them. Your presence became evidence that their heart could still feel deeply. The difficult truth is that hope often brings fear back with it. Once someone begins hoping again, they also realize there is now something valuable they could lose. Rejection becomes more painful. Silence becomes heavier. Distance becomes harder to tolerate. Vulnerability suddenly carries real emotional consequences. This is why emotionally wounded people sometimes sabotage the very connection they desire most. It is not because they do not want love. It is because they want it so deeply that losing it feels unbearable. Sometimes people run from what they value most because caring that much makes them feel exposed. That is why someone can love you and still retreat. They can miss you while remaining silent. They can need you while resisting closeness. It may seem illogical from the outside, but emotionally, it often makes perfect sense. Their past has taught them that attachment eventually leads to pain. You may still wonder if they truly loved you. Why did they never say it? Why the hesitation, the silence, or the emotional walls? For some people, saying "I love you" is not simply expressing emotion. It is surrendering control. It is admitting that another person has become deeply important. To confess those feelings means accepting vulnerability. It means admitting that your presence now has the power to comfort them, hurt them, change them, and transform their life. Some people delay those words not because they feel too little, but because they feel so much that speaking honestly would force them to face everything they have spent years avoiding. Perhaps the deepest truth is this: loving you changed them. That explains the intensity, the hesitation, the moments that felt almost sacred, followed by moments that felt painfully confusing. Real change rarely feels comfortable. Before it feels like growth, it often feels like losing the person they believed they had to be. That is why they may have appeared distant while quietly changing inside. Real transformation is rarely graceful. It asks old defenses to fall away. It asks survival patterns to loosen their grip. It asks the heart to trust again after years of protecting itself. From the outside, it may look like withdrawal. Inside, it often feels like emotional reconstruction. If you have judged this connection only by what was visible, you may have missed what was happening beneath the surface. Genuine love does not always create immediate clarity. Sometimes it first awakens everything unresolved. Old fears return, Old wounds begin speaking again. Hidden emotions rise until they can no longer be ignored. That is why two people can feel something profound and still struggle to move toward each other. Love is never only about attraction. It also awakens unfinished inner work. When that happens, each person eventually faces a choice: continue running from old patterns or finally confront the fears that have quietly shaped their life for years. Perhaps that is why you notice things their words never admitted. Maybe it was the way they looked at you when they thought you were not paying attention. Maybe it was the change in their energy whenever someone else came close to you. Maybe it was the quiet, emotional tension that appeared without explanation. Those moments were not necessarily imaginary. People with strong intuition often notice emotional patterns before they hear emotional honesty. Intuition does not depend only on logic. It quietly recognizes subtle changes, unspoken feelings, and emotional truths that behavior alone cannot fully explain. And if part of you has always felt there was more beneath their silence, there may have been. But there is something important you need to understand, especially if you have spent a long time waiting, analyzing every interaction, holding on to hope, and carrying the weight of uncertainty. Their love for you may be real. Their fear may be real. Their emotional struggle may also be real. Yet none of that makes their healing your responsibility. This is where many deeply caring people lose themselves. When you recognize someone's pain, especially someone who seems emotionally guarded, your first instinct is often to help. You want to love them enough that they finally feel safe. You want to reassure them, wait a little longer, become more patient, more understanding, and more available. But there is a very important difference between compassion and self-abandonment. Loving someone should never require you to lose your own center. Understanding another person's wounds should never become an excuse for endless emotional inconsistency. Feeling empathy for someone's fears should never mean carrying the entire emotional weight of the relationship by yourself. Healthy love always leaves room for both people to take responsibility for their own healing. Perhaps this is exactly what you needed to hear today, because this story is not only about why they fell in love with you, it is also about what this connection has revealed within you. Why did their silence affect you so deeply? Why did their inconsistency leave such a lasting impression? Why did this experience pull you into such intense emotional reflection? Sometimes the people who awaken us become mirrors as well. Just as you reflected hidden parts of them, they may have reflected hidden parts of you. Perhaps they touched your desire to be fully chosen. Perhaps they awakened old fears of abandonment. Perhaps they exposed how easily emotional intensity can be mistaken for genuine emotional availability. That realization may feel painful, but it also opens the door to lasting growth. Carl Jung spoke about projection, the unconscious tendency to place our unmet emotional needs onto another person. Sometimes we begin believing someone else holds the key to our happiness, healing, or completion. We become attached not only to who they are, but also to what they symbolize. They begin representing hope, closure, purpose, or the life we believe we cannot create without them. Eventually, life asks a much deeper question. What part of what you are searching for in them must first be rediscovered within yourself? That single question changes everything. It shifts your focus away from chasing another person's certainty and toward building your own emotional stability. It reminds you that true security cannot depend entirely on someone else's choices. When you stop seeking emotional completion through another person, something remarkable begins to happen. Your mind becomes quieter, your emotions become steadier. You stop analyzing every message, every silence, every delay, and every inconsistency. Instead of shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable, you begin standing firmly in your own truth and worth. Ironically, this inner shift often changes the relationship dynamic more than anything else ever could. Emotionally guarded people are often highly sensitive to emotional energy. They notice pressure, they notice pursuit, they notice emotional dependence. But they also notice something else. They notice when someone who once reached toward them becomes peacefully grounded within themselves. That moment can quietly become a turning point, not because you are playing games or trying to manipulate the situation, but because authenticity has a quiet power. When you stop abandoning yourself, your energy naturally changes. You become calmer, clearer, and more emotionally secure. That quiet confidence speaks louder than endless reassurance ever could. If they truly fell in love with you because of your emotional safety, your honesty, and your ability to awaken hope within them, then the worst thing you could do now is abandon those same qualities while trying to hold on to them. Stay true to the person they were drawn to. Remain warm, honest, and compassionate, but let those qualities exist alongside healthy self-respect. This is the emotional paradox many people eventually discover. Healthy love is not created by forcing movement. It grows when both people are willing to stand in truth. Truth quietly says, "I acknowledge what I feel." Truth also says, "I do not need to chase what is meant to meet me." And perhaps most importantly, truth says, "I can love someone without losing myself." That kind of emotional honesty carries tremendous power. If they are truly confronting their own fears, there may come a time when the pressure of avoiding their feelings becomes greater than the fear of expressing them. Suppressed emotions rarely disappear. Instead, they quietly return through memories, dreams, unexpected moments of sadness, and thoughts that refuse to fade. People can suppress their words for a long time, but suppressing genuine emotion is much more difficult. The heart continues speaking, especially during quiet moments when distractions disappear. It may be in those silent moments that your absence feels strongest. They may revisit old conversations, remember how emotionally safe they felt with you, and recognize the hope your presence quietly awakened within them. Eventually, if they are willing to be honest with themselves, they may reach a point where avoiding vulnerability becomes more painful than embracing it. That is often where real transformation begins, not when love first appears, but when running from it becomes more exhausting than facing it. That change cannot be forced from the outside. It must arise within them. You cannot make another person awaken emotionally, but you can stop interfering with that process. Sometimes the most loving choice is allowing someone to experience the natural consequences of emotional avoidance. Allow them to sit with the silence they created. Allow them to face themselves without you constantly filling every emotional gap. That is not punishment. It is simply allowing reality to teach what words cannot. Healthy boundaries often sound very simple. They say, "I care about you. I understand your fears. I recognize your struggles, but I cannot do your healing for you." That is compassion without self-sacrifice. That is love expressed with wisdom instead of self-neglect. That is emotional maturity in its healthiest form. For many people who have loved deeply, this becomes one of the hardest lessons to accept. Sometimes love is completely real, yet still not ready to become a healthy relationship. We naturally want love to be enough. We want strong feelings to guarantee a happy ending. We want emotional recognition to guarantee lasting commitment. But feelings alone cannot build a relationship. Love must eventually become courage. It must become honesty. It must become consistent action. Without those qualities, even sincere love can remain trapped as possibility instead of reality. And living inside endless possibility can become one of the most painful emotional experiences because almost love has a way of lingering in the heart for years. That is why your own clarity matters so much. Ask yourself gently, am I loving from inner strength or only from longing? Am I honoring what I feel while also honoring what I deserve? Am I waiting from a place of peace or from fear of letting go? These questions are not meant to judge you. They are meant to guide you back toward yourself. Healing does not always require forgetting someone. Sometimes healing means loving them while refusing to let uncertainty consume your life. Sometimes healing means accepting the connection while releasing the need to control its timing. Sometimes healing simply means trusting that what is truly meant for you does not require desperation. If this person genuinely loves you, one truth remains. Authentic love eventually moves toward honesty. It may not happen quickly, it may not happen exactly as expected, but truth has a quiet persistence. The heart eventually grows tired of denial. The emotional mask eventually becomes too heavy to carry, and sooner or later, what has been hidden often asks to be spoken. If that moment arrives, it will not happen because you chased harder or sacrificed more of yourself. It will happen because they finally became willing to stop running from their own heart. That is the part many people overlook. Perhaps this connection was never only about romance. Perhaps it was also about awakening. Perhaps they entered your life to teach you the difference between love and self-abandonment. And perhaps you entered theirs to awaken a part of the heart they believed had been lost forever.